Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience with some of our technical difficulties. But we're here 6 minutes after. We're getting it going. We're getting it rolling. My name is Amy Jansen, and I'm the chair of the BRASS Business Information Sources Committee. We are pleased to welcome you here today for our annual Publishers Forum. This is a space that we have annually for welcoming vendors and publishers to discuss important issues in the business library world. This year's theme is going to be big data and the related issues such as data literacy, privacy, AI, and ethical data usage. We're excited to have several data providers here today. Those representatives are from IPUMS, Words, and Dewey. So please save your questions or comments for the end of the session when our speakers are going to have plenty of time to address those. And before I pass it off, I really want to sincerely thank our speakers for taking the time to be here today and to speak with us. And I also want to thank each and every member of the Business Information Sources Committee for their hard work in putting this together. Special round of applause for Katie O'Hara Krebs, who has been our webinar master and manager, who stepped up coming into our committee very late and did a lot of the heavy lifting with arranging the webinar details. So thank you. And as well as everyone else who is involved in planning this, and our facilitators, our Q&A facilitator, Ryan, Carolyn, for introducing, and all the members of our committee for their hard work in making this happen. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to one of our committee members, Carolyn Klotzbach-Russell, hopefully I said his name right, to introduce our first speaker.
Great, thank you so much. So introducing the first speaker here, we have Kari Williams. So Kari is the User Support and Outreach Manager at IPUMS. She received her master's degree from the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs in 2013. She has expertise in harmonizing changes to the Census Occupation Classification Systems, the National Health Interview Survey, and inferring family interrelationships in public use data sets. In her current role, Kari is focused on connecting researchers with the current relevant data, cultivating training resources and opportunities for IPUMS data users, and identifying ways to increase usability of public available data for a variety of research-related topics. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kari. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Carolyn. All right, I am going to work on sharing my screen. I could have done this earlier during the troubleshooting. I am realizing. Let's all right. I'm assuming folks can see this. All right, great. So I'm Kari Williams. I am the User Support and Outreach Manager at IPUMS, and I am going to provide a high-level overview of some of the data we have and places where you might see it. Today, I'm happy to talk more about these resources and sort of tailor things to the audience, but I think it's helpful to know what kind of data IPUMS has available. So IPUMS receives grant funding to repackage secondary population data into research-ready formats. So we do this through harmonization, making things comparable across time and place, by offering customized data files, right? So instead of needing to pull down a full static file, people can pool together multiple years of data that they're interested in, and they can restrict the file to only the variables that are useful to them. Our documentation is integrated with our data. So you can think about combing through a 300-page PDF to find information. We've attached a lot of that to the variables, and we provide some supplemental documentation on top of that. We have data enhancements. These are special tools that are designed to sort of identify processes that many researchers will do again and again to the data, and they're complex to do. So we're trying to figure out how can we just make those things more available. We have a user support team that responds to questions that folks have about the data, and data and services are available free of charge. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. We have 9 major data collections. So instead of going through them all, we have microdata. So these are data where each record is a person, and the columns in the data file represent their responses to different items on a questionnaire. We also have summary data, right? And there you might think each record in a file is a place, and then you're seeing summary measures about that place in the columns. We have data from the US, but we also have international data. We have census data. We also have survey data. So these are, right, household surveys, labor force surveys, health surveys. And we have, let me see, sorry, I'm gonna follow up and hide my meeting controls so that I can tell you what is happening on the top of this. And then we have different levels of geographic detail. So to the extent that folks are really interested in place-based things, we have lots of detail in these summary data collections with tabular data. As you can imagine, with those person level data, there are more restrictions on identifying really specific places for confidentiality concerns. But we also have sub-state level detail, more detail in our US Census data collection and our international census and labor force surveys. And then a number of our other data collections, you can identify sub-state just maybe with less precision. And then we have GIS data for a number of our data collections as well. So those are just different ways that you can dice the data that we have available. At a high level, IPUMS, so we're the largest and we're the most intensively used database covering the human population. So across those 9 data collections, we have 2.6 billion person records. A lot of this is from full count census data that we have, historical full count census data, which can be linked oftentimes to modern surveys. So even if history isn't your deal, there's some relevance there. Over 150 countries are represented in our data. We have 63 million map polygons, 581 billion table cells in those, right, in those tabular collections. Our active user community, so folks who have used the data within the last 2 years, is 80,000. We disseminate 690 terabytes of data. That's how many, that's what we disseminated in 2024, with an average of 1,000 data requests each day. So there's lots of folks using it, and they're using it for a lot of different reasons. I think I'm just gonna walk through, instead of delving into the deep nitty-gritty of all the data we have, I'm gonna talk about kind of dig into why people use IPUMS data here. So a typical analysis process for somebody, right, and you all are maybe involved in this, is people identify this research question, right? And so they identify the data that they want. You have to go to wherever that website is. Maybe there's year-specific download pages. Maybe there's 2 files per year. Maybe there's 10 files per year, right? You download all of those. You have to modify the file to work with your preferred stats package, right? Lots of these things come only in specific formats. You have to combine all the files if you wanted to work, right? If there's many files per year or you wanted to look across time, you have to combine those all together. You drop the variables you don't want so that you can, right? It's not too computationally intensive. You're reviewing documentation, again, often buried in these PDFs. If you're working with historical data, the PDF is probably not actually a PDF that anything can read or search on. You're cleaning data to accommodate change that might happen over time. Then you create analytical variables, right? Like, what is it that you actually wanted to do instead of all of this prep work, and you do great science. So with IPUMS, you go to the website, you pick your samples and your variables. You download, so we've already merged them. We'll get one file, and it's going to have all of those together. So you don't have to do the cleaning or the merging. You download the file, formatted for your preferred stats package, and you just create your analytical variables. That basic data cleaning has been done for you already, as has the merging and lots of those data management tasks. And then do your work. I'm going to walk through what this looks like on our websites because I think it's more helpful to see an example. So these are US health data, which are maybe less relevant to this group, but creating these slides for a different data collection was not something that happened in my work week this week. So when you come here, right, where if you go to nhis.ipums.org, most people are going to come here and they're going to click data. for this group, I will highlight we have some supplemental and reference documentation that many users will blow by, but I have a feeling that a number of people here pay attention to these items. So I'll flag that. But the modal user is going to click on Get Data right away. You aren't looking for an FTP site to download files. You go there. So you build a custom data file with multiple samples and only the variables of interest, right? So we'll start with select samples here. In this case, you can combine multiple samples into a single file. We'll just grab 2010 forward. And now, right, it tells us we've selected the samples. We're going to select variables. So I want some person level variables. I'm going to look at the general health measures here. And I can click on this plus sign to just include this in my data file by default. Again, right, only the variables that I want will be included. Alternatively, I can click on the variable name. And here, I'm going to walk through this variable level documentation. It's directly attached to the variable page on our website. So here we see the codes that are associated with this variable. You can see the unweighted frequencies as well with this radio button. A description, what does this measure? This is a subset of the detail available here, but kind of like the core description, and then more information is available. Comparability issues. If you're going to use this over time, what do you need to know? Right, self-rated health was for a long time reported on a 4-point scale, and in recent years it's a 5-point scale. So that information is flagged here. The universe, who was asked the question? The availability, how many years of data can you, how far back does this go? When is this available? The survey text is directly integrated with the variable here. That's often released as a separate document. So you can see that here. And there's actually, my screenshot has omitted it, but there's a way that you can jump right into the full survey text too. So for folks who are really thinking about ordering of questions, or I'd like to see the neighboring questions and where this lived. And then we have explicit guidance for some of our data collections on which weight to use based on the combination of the samples that you're using and the variable. So, and then we also can map the harmonized IPUMS variables onto original data provider names, right? We aren't the collectors of these data. You can add the variable to your cart, and then you'll see here the number of variables in the cart increments up. So when we look at viewing what's in the data file, you'll notice we've only added health, but there's all this extra stuff. These are technical variables that we find most people want to use, so we just include them by default to save people the headache of needing to go back and recreate their data file. If you click Create Your Data File, then you'll end up on this summary page. And so here you can change the data format. By default, these are fixed with text files, but you could format it for, right, Stata, SAS, SPSS, a CSV. We have a package for reading data into R or into Python. Attached characteristics is an example of some data enhancements that we offer. So you can do that here. You describe your data file, and then you submit the request. So now here, right, this is, here you have a record of your custom data file request. We save these for about 72 hours, after which folks can just click there's a resubmit button and it will regenerate your file. We also offer a DDI compatible codebook, which includes a citation for the data set, and it points at the DOI. So we snapshot, because our database is evolving, right? We add new samples and new variables on a regular basis. And so we capture an annual snapshot, and then we have a metadata-driven revision history to note intervening changes to the data between those annual snapshots. But we have those available for folks who feel like they need to go back to a previous version. So that how am I doing on time here? A few minutes left, maybe. No one's unmuted to stop me, so I'm muted.
You're fine, Kari. Thank you.
All right, wonderful.
Good.
So that's sort of how, I mean, that's a quick insight into how you get data from IPUMs and some of the things we do. And then sometimes it's just more helpful to see the examples, right? And so a lot of our users are in academic and research spaces, right? So our grant funders are really interested in folks who are using these data in research spaces. I think these examples all, I tried to tailor examples that might be of greater interest here. These are all recent examples that use IPUMS data. In this case, they're all using the current population survey. So this is a US labor force survey. It has a battery of monthly labor force questions, and then some rotating topical supplements that folks are really interested in leveraging. And it actually has a panel component. So you can observe folks for across a 16-month period. You get 8 observations. So people use this sometimes to look at short-term change. So these are examples of some recent journal articles that use IPUMS data, but it also, you see it in the news media all the time, right? And so this is a subset here. It's looking at demographic group, but they break it down and start looking at specific occupations later. We've done some work to facilitate harmonization of occupations over time, right? As with each new release of the standard occupation classification and the NAICS codes, right, there are changes there are some downstream changes in how we're measuring those things. And so we've done work that goes sort of above and beyond to try and facilitate harmonization over time. And so we see those as being those are some of our more popular variables, because that work it's an example of a data enhancement. It's so much work for each individual researcher to do, and it's largely consistent, or ideally consistent, across researcher, and many of them are going to be faced with the same choices. This is dated, but I think it was a really cool interactive from the Washington Post about the gender pay gap. So here they're talking about the day when women start working for free in the year based on the gender pay gap. So how many days in a year? And then this interactive where they're sort of showing by size of bubble, they're looking at male dominated and female dominated occupations and looking at the gap in there. This is, if none of you have ever explored flowing data, there are some really outstanding visualizations. This uses time diary data where folks report what they were doing over a 24-hour period. So they report the activity at very granular levels, along with things like where they were, who you were with. There are some supplements that ask about sort of momentary measures of well-being. And so there are these structured quantitative data that have a really cool qualitative narrative. So here I grabbed a screenshot, but this follows folks through an average day. So you can see at 7:56 a.m., right? About a third of people are still sleeping. Some early birds are at work. There's a lot of folks getting ready for work or eating breakfast. And so you can sort of see some of those things. And then when you watch the full version of this, you can see the dots moving throughout the day. So you sort of see when you see these big bursts, right? Alarms go off at 6 o'clock. They go off at 7 o'clock. People are commuting. So kind of a cool way to visualize the data. And then this is also from flowing data. This is looking at the switching rate for different jobs. So I think this is leveraging the panel aspect of the CPS, the panel component of the CPS, and it's looking at cases where folks change jobs over the course of the panel. And so the bigger bubbles indicate jobs where there are more people, and then the further up they are, there's a higher switching rate, right? So you might expect lawyers, judges, other judicial workers, there's maybe more training there. It's perhaps not surprising to see that there are lower switching rates there. Cashiers, right, presumably less training, and you might see more switching in jobs for those folks. So just some examples to sort of bring to light not just how you get the data, but how people are using the data. With that, thank you. Here is a way to get a hold of our user support team to ask more questions about IPUMS data. I'm happy to talk more at the Q&A time. Thanks.
Thank you, Kari. I'll leave it to Carolyn to introduce our next speaker.
All right, thank you. And we are going to words, correct? Just want to make sure I have the order.
Yes, our speakers are here and ready to go.
All right. All right, we have two speakers here with us, Matt and Laura. I'm going to introduce them. Matt Pearson is a researcher at Horton Research Data Services with the Horton School, University of Pennsylvania. His work is in the field of public finance, household finance, financial assets and markets, and law and finance, with a particular interest in the interplay of specific asset and legal structures and tax evasion and avoidance. Laura Dean joined the WORDS customer service experience team in 2015. In her role as Director of Customer Experience, she designs and implements WORDS support operations, leads clients through onboarding, including the deployment of products and technical services, and collaborates with marketing on campaigns that promote user adoption and knowledge. WORDS benefits from Laura's customer-centric focus from her years working in retail management with brands such as Honda, 10,000 Villages, and Lululemon. Laura oversees workflow and process management, critical to supporting WORDS researchers around the world. I'll let Matt and Laura take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for the nice introduction. My partner, Matt and I are joining from Philadelphia today, and it's my first time joining this forum, so I do apologize. My work week did not permit preparing a customized slide deck. But I think the areas of interest and certainly the insights that we gain from the librarians, I think it's mostly librarians that are on the call today, and certainly the feedback that's shared with the relationship building that my team helps to support at WORDS is one where I want to always model an open door policy. So please, as you're supporting your researchers, as you may be conducting research yourself, please know that our team is behind the scenes, eager to help and reach out in any way that we can. I'm going to allow Matt to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. Matt, are you still on? Did your Wi-Fi connection? Yeah, are you over there? Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm here. Sure. So I wasn't sure if you guys wanted an overview of WORDS. I guess I can give a more verbal one. Like Laura mentioned, I've been having internet trouble today, so if I drop off or sound like a robot, let me know. Well, I guess I won't know, but someone can know. Yeah, so I guess a brief overview of WORDS. We are a data provider of financial and accounting data. My area is more actually the non-financial accounting data side, which is very small, but it's growing. We provide data to, I believe, over 500 institutions worldwide, universities mainly, but there are some federal agencies and other sort of academic-like institutions baked into that. I'm sure some or many of you have heard of us in that regard. I believe stats-wise, we had around 20,000 active users. So a little less than IPMS, but good for them and good for us, I guess, that everybody's, there's a lot of people involved in academic research. Yeah, I think that's a brief overview. We deliver most standard financial databases. A lot of them come from S&P. I'm trying not to use like the standard corporate acronyms. London Stock Exchange Group, which used to include Thomson Reuters, became Refinitiv. And YSE, other stock exchanges. So that's kind of a brief overview of who we are. Yeah, I don't think that we were going to go over some particular questions.
Yeah, the questions that we were prompted and kind of prepared for from the panel hosts were talking mostly about data security, compliance, relevant laws and regulations. And I think that's where the areas of interest for this group kind of overlap and lie. And Matt, feel free to interject as I'm kind of reading through. So some of the things that I prepared for today were, some of the questions that we were presented and prompt with was, how do we ensure patient privacy and data security in compliance with relevant laws and regulations? We are aware of and in compliance with 508 compliance for accessibility, as well as GDPR. We are a global business, so our European subscribers, we adhere by GDPR policies, as well as HECVAT, which I believe is more on the data security technical side, a little bit out of my knowledge wheelhouse, but HECVAT policies. moving forward with our data retention policies and how long our data is stored, the school representatives, which are mostly the words reps, which I think many of you, I scrolled through the attendee, the participant list earlier and recognized more than a handful of names. So our school representatives and word management, find trend analysis, very useful for our business decisions. So usage data is retained for those purposes. And, we share that data, it's privatized, it's, managed on the back end and anonymized after time. And let's see, the next question was how we measure the effectiveness of data-driven publishing decisions. So Words as an organization does not actually publish, but we have identified the long-term increase of empirical papers being published and more data sources being cited in those papers. Matt, I'll pause here if there was anything you wanted to add, because I think that's a little bit more crossover with your wheelhouse here at Words.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of different. I mean, I individually publish, and there's a team of which I am a member of active researchers here. We act as subject matter specialists within Words, and we both advise on what data to bring on board the platform. We are obviously, experts on our individual areas of the data. And as part of that, and as trying to liaise with the academic community, we're also active researchers. So we both publish and do all the fun reading of papers and the whole research process. If I could condense that to a few sentences. Yeah, I would also mention, for those who aren't aware, what Laura means when we talk about Words representatives. So our structure of the platform is that when, let's say, a university subscribes to Words, they have some representatives who are, I don't know, appointed, elected. I don't know how they they are chosen for the job. But they are typically in charge of creating, or not creating, but accepting new accounts within the platform, making sure that, let's say a student says that they're enrolled at the school, whether they actually are and whether they therefore have access through the university. And those representatives are what Laura means by Words reps. You want to keep going?
Yeah, sure. So our next prompt was, what are your future plans for expanding the capabilities and incorporating new data sources? So this kind of overlaps a little bit with what you were speaking about, Matt. The Words continues to expand the data offerings in trending areas of interest. One that I had noticed shortly before COVID-19 hit was we brought on American healthcare data, which was just maybe some amazing insight by some of our decision makers, but certainly has become kind of a stronghold database. And since then, we've expanded our coverage of some healthcare data as well as some outside of financial realms. And we encourage our Words reps and our users, our researchers, to share topics and data products. And that's where the feedback, that continual open door policy, if you're hearing of a trending area or you have a faculty who is really pushing forward about an area or topic of interest that is new for you or fresh, please let us know, because we may be collecting other observations across our other subscribing schools. And certainly if we have some more trending interest, that kind of pushes that prioritization forward for those different data types. So like I said, you can submit that feedback through Word support. My team is on the back end, reading all of those submissions and categorizing, tabulating, and kind of prioritizing what types of topics and areas of research your researchers are interested in. Our next prompt was, what are some ways you choose to format and present your data or develop supplemental tools to promote data literacy from patrons? So we continually strive to improve the ease of use for our researchers, especially our newer researchers. We know that there's a life cycle in academia that happens predictably every academic year, with fresh researchers coming onto our platform. So we get that yearly and even semester-wise rollover of brand new users coming through. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with Day One researchers. We have a ton of recorded content in our video library to give you some steps to get started. You know, how do you want to extract some data from our platform? We have very simplistic web queries that lay on top of every single table we host on Words. And you can walk through 4 steps on one page and complete a data query. For our more advanced programmers, we have many methods of programming access as well. But if you are looking to just get started, review those video resources. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if you're having problems beyond that after you've digested those resources, that's where Word support can come in. And our subject matter experts are standing by to answer some of those questions, help you translate some of those variables, or if you get stuck, you know, doing all of your configurating or your code writing. And, you know, Matt, you get a smile there. I'll pause for a second if you wanted to add anything, or I'll finish up with my last point.
No, I mean, when she says, you know, subject matter expert, she just means me, I guess. But
Yeah, I
that's
mean
all.
Matt, but there's many of you. There's
I'm
a
typically
handful of
answering those.
researchers, yeah, that we have on staff that you know, they are providing the answers behind the scenes. So you know, we triage and escalate and do our best to prioritize the inquiries that come through, try to get you a response within just a few business days for most kind of streamlined questions, but certainly for those more research in depth, the things that get to the RD team, the team that Matt works on, it may take us a couple days to kind of replicate and you know, kind of run analysis on the different questions. I'm going to wrap up our panel here with the prompt of: what role does AI play in your products? And, you know, right now, AI is the trending topic across literally every conference or panel that I, you know, encounter. AI is being introduced to make navigating words easier, and it does not yet affect our research data or research algorithms. Matt, would you want to talk about any of the tools that the RDs have built with the AI functionalities or features? Is there anything of interest? Pardon me.
No.
That's
I don't
okay.
know.
That's okay.
We do, yeah. Okay, I can talk generally, I guess. As a reformed academic, it's hard for me to not take up 20 minutes talking about something. Yeah, we've developed a few tools. None of them are user facing behind the scenes, to typically just to kind of work with unstructured data for us to gain insights into where academia and the academic community is looking to kind of move to or move in publications, and therefore what sort of data they would need, you know, to provide for that. It's a little bit data driven. It's a little bit guesswork. It's a little bit prognostication, I would say. I don't know how to speak more technically about it in a simple way. But yeah, there's nothing really user facing that we do currently, and I don't think we really have any plans to. Yeah.
Yeah, we would try to, you know, coming from academia, I think we use a lot of caution around the AI being kind of a very much new trending topic in technology. You know, Penn and Wharton are certainly a lot more conservative in how they embrace and certain guidelines. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the future there's more of an adoption or a way to kind of weave it into the Words products. All right. Well, I will hand it back to Amy. Thank you. And certainly, if you have any questions, you know, towards the end of the panel or after this session is ended, Word support is always there to support you, to hear from you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Laura and Matt, for that. We have juicy questions coming, and we will hold those until after our last speaker. So I will leave that to Katie to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Amy. I would like to introduce Evan Barry. He is the founder and CEO of Dewey Data, a database for academics to access data sets from dozens of industry-leading data vendors for their research. Dewey has helped thousands of researchers from over 600 universities worldwide access data from companies like Atom, SimilarWeb, Veriset, People Data Labs, SafeGraph, and more. Before founding Dewey, Evan was the VP of Marketing at SafeGraph, where he helped build and manage a consortium that provided free data access to academic researchers during COVID-19. Evan holds a bachelor's and master's degree in management science and engineering from Stanford University, and he lives in San Diego with his wife and son. You can reach Evan at evan@deweydata.io. Evan, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to present. Let me share my screen really quick here. But I appreciate the invite. I'm excited to dive into this topic. I kind of live and breathe data. I have for the last few years. And so I think this topic is kind of near and dear to what we're building at Dewey. So I'm excited to kind of introduce Dewey at a high level. I'll keep it super high level in terms of kind of going into Dewey. I think I'd rather talk about kind of the data challenges that we see a lot of our customers, which are business librarians mostly, facing. And I'll kind of sprinkle in some introductions to Dewey there, because I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, but I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard of Dewey yet. So at a high level, the intro was helpful because, my background is kind of on the data vendor side of this. And so when I was the VP of marketing at SafeGraph, like you mentioned, we realized during COVID that we had a great opportunity to work with academia because we saw a bunch of researchers come inbound saying, hey, we need access to your mobility data to understand what's happening with COVID and how people movement changes are happening. And so we made the business decision at the time to actually just give the data out for free to anyone who came in with a EDU email. And it turned out to kind of, it really blew up into this pretty impressive consortium. I think we had 8,000 researchers at one point in the Slack channel using our data, publishing some really great papers with it. And from the data vendor's perspective, we realized that there's a great untapped kind of market in academia, but you have to think about it pretty differently if you want to turn it into a valuable channel for your business. And we did it as a marketing channel by saying, hey, it's worth it for us to get our data cited. Maybe not the best channel to commercialize if you're thinking about it from where you're gonna get budget compared to maybe your retailers, your hedge funds that you work with. But after a couple of years of doing this, we realized after talking with a lot of our users that they were having trouble getting their hands on really cool data sets from other data companies because data companies just didn't want to prioritize academia, if I'm being blunt. And so I saw that as a solvable problem, given that we had solved it from SafeGraph. And so I started Dewey to basically unlock a lot of the challenges that we see when it comes to academia or librarians and researchers getting their hands on data sets from corporate data companies. So our whole business is built off of listening to the challenges that we see librarians and researchers face getting access to what we would call a commercial data set. And we built our whole business around this core problem. So we're exclusively focused on the academic research market. I'll go into the product in a sec, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things here that we're building in this space to try to be as helpful as possible and be kind of a consultative resource for data librarians or business librarians. And so some examples of that outside of our product are actually, I think G-Bay, I saw her in the attendees. She and Edward Edward from UPenn helped us kind of create this market map of other data sets that are available to license to academic researchers. And we just wanted to make this available as a resource. It's not even all Dewey data sets. I think all the words data sets are on here as well, as long as the companies we've seen successfully licensed with academia in the past. So it's just an example of a resource that we wanted to create to say, hey, if you are, maybe a new data librarian, or if you're trying to flex into some different roles as a librarian, but you need to kind of understand what data sets are out there to license, this might be a great resource, and we'll continue to build it. And then I think I also saw Steve in the audience. I put a guest blog post on his great blog that I've been a fan of for years, but just to kind of give the perspective of what I've seen about data licensing from kind of the other side of the table, which is from the data vendor's point of view. But really what it comes down to and what we've built is our core platform. And so we've brought a lot of these kind of modern data challenges and try to solve them in our platform. And I'll go through in the rest of the presentation some of the challenges that I most commonly hear, but this kind of GIF just shows the experience of a user just quickly browsing data sets on our platform, understanding what's in there, and then being able to easily consume, preview, sample the data sets to make it super, super easy to kind of connect to some of these world-class data vendors. So when I was kind of going through this, concept of starting Dewey, we talked with a bunch of users, and we continue to talk with users today. And we kind of realized that there's a whole host of challenges when it comes to working with data that a lot of these researchers are facing. And they kind of come a bit chronologically if you think about what you do when you go through a data license. So it starts with one, understanding pricing. Like, what am I can I even afford this data vendor that I'm looking at that maybe some of our researchers are requesting? Are there variable costs, et cetera? Okay, great. Maybe I agree on pricing, but now I have to work with all these different unique data licensing, and the terms are all challenging. Then if I do the term, I actually get the license done, I have to ingest the data, figure out how to provision it to our end users. Then I have to support the users, then I have to do this ROI calculation on, is it worth renewing? There's a lot of challenges when it comes with data services. And, in our opinion, and the reason Dewey exists is because we think that, maybe these challenges aren't solved, but they can be definitely alleviated by some good, modern tech solutions. And then I have the screenshot of, this is from last week. Obviously, I think budgets are probably top of mind. I don't think that's unique to librarians. I'm sure budgets are always tight, but, especially today, just with potentially looming cuts, I'm sure a lot of, freezing is happening on potential spend or even hiring. And so I think it's a good time to try to think a little bit differently about how we work and acquire data sets in the future. So I'll quickly go through these challenges and then kind of talk about the Dewey approach. But the first one obviously is at the beginning of a negotiation with the vendor is this concept of black box pricing. Like you really don't know what you're going to get. You have to go through the negotiation. This is where we are transparent about our pricing. We have kind of two main types of subscriptions. One is with like an institution. It could be at the departmental school or university level. Another is with just the end research team, which is a bit unique, where we can actually do the license with the end researchers too, if the library or the department isn't ready to kind of do this institutional license. But we want to make our pricing upfront, fixed. There's no hidden fees. You're not going to get thrown a bunch of like compute costs, or you're not charged per seat or anything like that. Like once we have a customer, we want them to maximize the utility of that decision. And so we don't want to limit it based on seats or number of papers or anything like that. And we also want the pricing to be transparent, so you can make your life easier. Even if you can't afford it now, when you are planning for future cycles, you can kind of get a sense of what that pricing is going to be in the future, so you don't have to come back and do any negotiation. And we think it's fair that users, different universities are kind of paying the same price. So bit of a unique approach to the market, but we think that it's, feedback so far has been positive that that's kind of something that we do. Next, it comes to the data licensing, right? So if you're like me, the screenshot will give you some anxiety. This is, one page of maybe a 5 or 6 page data license. It's full of red lines. If you're working with licensing from different data vendors, you probably have dozens of these different templates that have been sent with you with dozens of different, red lines from procurement or lawyers, et cetera. And so at the end of the day, it puts a really hard burden on librarian or library teams to basically understand, okay, what were all the unique niche terms that got finalized in all of these licenses? And how do I make sure that I communicate these terms to our end users when they're using the data, so that we're, not liable and introducing risk to our, organization? And so that's kind of another reason why we are approaching this market by saying, hey, let's all do this in one subscription. So the whole kind of thing behind Dewey is that with one subscription to our platform, you're unlocking all of our data partners. We're not saying that you have to go and do a la carte licenses with each new data vendor that we have or add. And because of that, we've done the work in the background to make sure that these data vendors, are okay and comfortable adhering to one strict end user terms that we're passing through to you. And this is just nice to save kind of that overhead and that burden of having to go and do a bunch of these custom data licenses with a bunch of vendors. And I'll talk through a little bit about how the subscription model is also great for, continual value, because we continue to add new data vendors over time. And then we do a lot of vetting on who we want to add, right? We're not just going to throw a bunch of random data vendors on here. We typically look at a certain category, say we'll go into the mobility, or we're looking at healthcare now, or ESG, or potentially the supply chain. And we want to work with the best vendors, right? So we're going to go in and kind of vet that they have good longitudinal history. They have, they're keeping the data refreshed. They have quality sources of data. So we want to put a lot of this work on us, because this is what we're really good at, in order to kind of take a lot of that off of your plate. If we keep moving along, so say you get through the pricing, you get through the license, and now you have to actually work with the data. This is where you are going to see thousands of permutations of what a data vendor is going to expect from you. So a lot are going to, deliver like, CSV files, some deliver Parquet files, some have full refreshes, some have incremental. We see this is like a screenshot of part of our kind of back end in the database and how we figure this out, but it's just to show you an example on the left that each data vendor is just going to have a different, storage of, is it in Snowflake or S3 or Google Cloud or FTP. And then they're going to, deliver this to you, or maybe if they have a platform, you're going to have a certain number of seats that you have to provision to users. But if you think about doing dozens, of these data licenses across a bunch of different vendors, you're going to have so many different permutations of ways you have to support data. And this is where we've kind of brought a modern data infrastructure and data engineering to solve this problem. And so that we're handling a lot of the complexity that comes with onboarding these vendors. And so at the end of the day, what the user just sees is this really clean user experience where the data has already been standardized. And then they can really see some good, easy previews of the data, full dictionaries, samples, etc. And so our whole goal here is, yes, our data platform allows you to download the data, but we don't want you to download the data if you are just doing that to evaluate the data sets. We actually want to make the ability to consume and kind of understand what's in the data as easy as possible before you have to go download, gigabytes or even terabytes of data onto your machine or onto a cluster. And so we created the platform to be super easy to navigate and understand what's in the data. And one of the prompts, again, was around AI. And I think this is similar to what the Words team had mentioned, where this is where I think from a user's point of view, we're going to see some really cool advancements in AI. And this is something we're working on to, allow human language queries in understanding what's in the data, or, ability to search and find new data sets. And so that's something we're currently working on and super excited to roll out here soon. Just to continue on, I think I have two more here, 2 or 3 more here. So, once you actually have gone through all of the things above, now you actually have this data set in the hands of your users. Obviously, support becomes a new challenge, right? So this is where I'll put my data vendor hat back on and say that, we've seen this time and time again with data vendors that work with academia. Usually, if they do a deal, they'll give a pretty large discount to academics or researchers that have licensed their data. But then because of that, they have pretty little incentive to put a lot of work into that customer to support them into the future. And so oftentimes vendors are unable to support any sort of questions that come back about how to use the data. And so the library is probably getting inboxes like this, where you're getting tons of user questions from your researchers in terms of like questions about the data and validation and quality, sourcing, etc. And so again, every new data license that the library is doing is probably adding an overhead burden of trying to support users. And that's another piece that we are trying to say, no, let us do it. If we did the work to kind of onboard this partner, we want to make sure that we can support those users who have questions too. And so we create pretty clear documentation with citation requirements, information about sourcing, longitudinal coverage, etc. for each vendor, even if they don't have that previously. So that it's really easy for our users to understand what they're getting their hands on. And if we hear a question more than once, we're going to put it in the docs. So that's another thing here is there's a kind of a support forum. And because of this like network effect of having a bunch of users from a bunch of different universities asking questions about the data, if you're a researcher at one university, you actually benefit from seeing the public questions of researchers from other universities. So also want to take away a lot of the overhead and burden from the library teams to help with support. And then the last two, this is an interesting one. So a lot of the pushback I've seen and heard around subscriptions for data is this kind of feeling that the data gets stagnant over time. Because a lot of times what's unlocked with a subscription is, all of the longitudinal history. And then year 2, you're like, okay, I'm paying the same amount, but I'm really only getting updates. I think that's true. I also think, obviously you have to remember you're usually not purchasing the data. It is like, you're licensing permitted use, but to kind of get around that whole thing, like we're always adding new data to the platform, and that's included in the subscription you already have, right? I think that's one thing that's unique about Dewey is when we add new data sets, we're not now expecting you to have to go and have a new data license with this new vendor or introduce a new package type that you have to subscribe to. So when we have our university-wide licenses, we've seen, in 2024, we doubled the amount of data that was included in our pricing, and we didn't change our pricing. So I think it's something that we're here to solve the challenges of researchers. And so, if we were increasing our pricing as frequently as we were increasing our data sets, I think it would quickly become unattainable. So we have a really good motion around acquiring new data partners. It takes us about 2 weeks to onboard a new data vendor because kind of we have built all these great tech integrations. And so we can really quickly add value to the data, to our offering over time. And then finally, this is kind of like the end of the workflow of evaluating a data vendor. When you get to that renewal, it's really hard often when you are acquiring data sets to kind of understand the return on that investment. And so this is another place where we want to help you make that call of, okay, if I have to do this big renewal for Dewey or something else, I want to make sure that I can kind of understand the value of what that invested, or what was in that investment. And so we have a bunch of basically data on who is consuming what type of data sets are popular by your users. And we have views or reports that we can send with the admins, usually the librarians of our customers. But then most importantly, we actually want to measure success of, is this turning into publications? And so We keep a repository published on our website. We're keeping it updated every time we see a paper that's citing our data vendors or even citing us. And this is something we can work with together with our customers to basically make sure that we're helping you make that calculation. And so if you are coming up on a renewal or you want to evaluate the value of the data licenses that you have, that we're here to help. So those are the kind of the main challenges we were looking to solve. I hope some of these resonated. I think our whole thing is we're super open to feedback and we want to keep learning from you. So I would love to hear in the Q&A or after what I got wrong or what you disagree with. Just kind of summarizing some of the challenges we see and where Dewey fits. And I'll leave it with, again, our whole company was built on by listening to customers and seeing a challenge and trying to fix those challenges. And so your feedback really does drive our product. We're a small, nimble team. We can move and build really quickly. And so I'm super excited to continue to kind of build in this market and see where we can be helpful. So if you ever want to connect or just, get feedback on our product or even get we can build a quick report for you of, usage across your university or anything like that. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can always reach a human on our side. So thanks for the time.
Thank you, Evan. I am now going to turn things over to Ryan Yoakum, a member of our committee, who is going to facilitate the Q&A. But I also want to encourage everyone who's attending to please ask your questions in the Q&A, and those on our committee who are shown as panelists at the top are welcome to ask questions as well directly. So I will pass it over to Ryan.
All right, awesome. I also will note that I might go back to some of the questions depending on the number that we get. There seems to be already plenty that have been answered, but if there's any questions that might potentially be interested for people who are watching this as a recording, I'll go back to those questions and might have that just for verbal reference. But we're going to start with this first question. So this is a question for both Words and Dewey data. Are there any plans to integrate a local large language model into Words or Dewey so that users can use Words or Dewey proprietary data with an LLM that won't violate Words or Dewey contract provisions because the LLM will not be able to add the proprietary data to their own LLM corpus? There's a huge demand for this, though obviously the local LLM would not be the most cutting edge large language model.
I'm happy to chime in on the Dewey side. We're definitely looking at kind of a lot of solutions and like features that the AI can add to our platform. We're doing a big kind of like refactoring actually of our data to get it all into a streamlined database and data warehouse so that it's actually clean and we can better query across multiple data vendors right now and data sets. And so the idea being that one, I mentioned like you can do kind of a natural language query and kind of understand what's in the data, but this is probably asking more about, and I'm not an expert on AI, but I think one of the things we're looking at in the future and will be enabled by what we're building now is kind of creating these environments where like kind of a private environment for our users so they can do some kind of like LLM work on their own account versus having to kind of download the data and merge it with others where you kind of run into some of the terms or restrictions based on our license agreements. And so we are trying to create more of like sandbox environments in Dewey to allow for users to kind of use some of these modern tools like large language models.
Yeah, I can answer on Words' behalf, I guess, as well. I don't think we have any plans to integrate a local LLM at this time. I mean, in terms of one of the more common models that you might have heard of, anything from OpenAI or Claude or anything like that, in partnering with another organization, we do have some internal models that users can use through our partnership with LexisNexis. Those are more for kind of the discussion here is more of a question of what even does the term AI mean. Those are your kind of basic machine learning models, which is what I would call your basic LLMs. That not anything like the larger models that are stood up by these larger organizations. But users are free to run those as they want already within Words. But those are something that are very specific that we can control as far as the broader discussion of proprietary data.
So I'm gonna skip down a little bit. There seems to be a question about for Dewey. Are there any plans for Dewey to share out use cases more broadly, such as the or the SSRN paper series that Words also seems to have?
Yeah, so this is a great question. This is something we are trying to always get better at. Excuse me, is kind of like I said, understand kind of the post data access use of our data. And so we're looking at things like DOIs for our data sets and things like that, so we can understand and honestly link back and have better citations around the use of our data. Because one of the common requests and something we put into our documentation is every time a researcher is looking at a new data set for the first time, they quickly want to understand how that data has been worked with before. Obviously, if it's been through a successful publication project process, it's a huge leg up for kind of understanding that they can probably use this research or data for their research. And so it's something we're definitely looking better at. We publish our own monthly newsletter, which cites some of the latest papers that have been published using our data sets. But I think we're definitely trying to understand, this is a great link. I was actually just looking at it. How we can do stuff like this in the future to make sure that we know how our data is being cited. So great suggestion and something we'll definitely look at.
Awesome. Then just a quick comment real quick. Not a question, but a comment of how important price transparency is. Thanks, Evan, for this. Prices should always be posted so that one knows pricing ahead of time and not have to worry about a deal or being cheated. So, I'm actually going to go back real quick to a previously asked question. This is about for IPUMS. If we have a Federal Statistical Data Research Center, FSDRC, on campus, should I send them there or to that first before going to IPUMS?
Thanks. So FSRDCs are places where folks start. Many of you are familiar, on the off chance that you aren't, right? They're essentially little mini satellite extensions of the Census Bureau where you can access restricted use versions of US federal data typically. So there are loads of economic data. I think I would say if IPUMS offers the data that you're interested in, it's worth a stop there. I think, right, the FSRDC process it's a process. So I think, right, if you have 6 months to add to your research timeline, and it's not clear that you truly need those restricted use versions of the data, I would say starting with the public use versions is a good call, whether you have access to IPUMS versions or not, right? Even if you didn't have harmonized IPUMS data, doing all of those processes to make things comparable across time in an FSRDC environment is going to pose its own set of challenges. I think we're co-located with an FSRDC, and so we'll often work with an administrator to ask more questions and try and help figure out what sorts of things can folks access in the FSRDC. Also, notably, oftentimes you can get IPUMS harmonized if you do need the restricted use versions and the data are available from IPUMS. There are decennial US Census data that have IPUMS harmonization on them in the FSRDC. We are working to get IPUMS harmonized American Community Survey data in there, but that is a work in progress. For non-Census Bureau data products, oftentimes those original data providers will let you bring harmonized versions in. And so when you're writing your FSRDC application, we have some cases where there's sample text. So you can talk about using the IPUMS version of the data and appending the restricted use measures onto those. The other perk of that, right, is you can do the bulk of your work outside of that highly restrictive environment where you have access to the internet to troubleshoot your code and all of those other things. And then folks can go into the FSRDC and just work on the restricted pieces.
Awesome. So going back to Dewey, there's a question here of, does Dewey support Easy Proxy, an alternative to single sign-on?
Yeah, so we do have single sign-on integration. So we can handle anything that's on the SAML protocol. And I was just looking this up. I believe Easy Proxy does have that. And so, we've integrated with universities that are on, Shibboleth is kind of the most common. But anything that's built on the SAML 2.0 protocol, which I think most of these authenticators are, we have a pretty simple integration to make that available. So yeah, when we do university-wide licenses, we want users to be able to sign in with their university credentials. So again, you don't have to manage now some other random third-party vendor to make it easier for your users.
Awesome. We're going to jump back to a previously asked question. So this is about words. So in words, many variables are not on the web interface and only behind the scenes in the SAS interface. Many users miss this part of the documentation. Many users miss this part, and documentation does not make obvious what is not in the web interface. How does Words decide what to put on the web interface versus only SAS?
Do you want me to? I'll leave my question verbally, and then I'll say something else, I guess, differently. Yeah, well, I mean, we're aware that this is kind of an issue. It's a little bit chicken and egg. The role of a data provider is to not just necessarily throw all the data at somebody and then hope they can figure it out, but to harmonize, to standardize, and to kind of cut through what's both necessary and what's not. Historically, what we've done is, like I said, we have a team of researchers here on staff, of which I am one. And what data users are most commonly interested in is what typically gets a web query, which is to say about 90% of our data probably has a web query facing it. For that extra 10%, there's a lot of just like small tables. And typically it's not like hidden from users, it's just only accessible for those who know how to code using SAS or some other program, or download via SFTP, more technical protocols. We're kind of aware that this is self-reinforcing. Like if you only present a certain subset of data and then you ask people what they want, they're probably going to say what you've presented to me. So, obvious selection issues induced. We've been working on fixing this, and so we have a project. I believe it's wrapping up soon. The reason I'm actually saying soon is because I can't tell if it's user facing because it's available for me. I would need to log into a different account. But it's all of these smaller data sets will have their own web queries that should be rolling out pretty quickly. So all of the data should be available via web in a simple interface, if that's the way you want to use it. I actually kind of wanted to add something to the IPMS question, if I can. So I feel like you're underselling it. So what Carrie's not necessarily telling you is that the 1850 to 1950 use files, I forget the exact term.
Yeah,
Yes.
with names.
Yes. So those are linked by IPMS. They're available in FSRDC because IPMS did so. Them and both the BYU project did as well. Census under Title 13 is not necessarily required to digitize past data. Katie Janadek at Census has this really cool project, which is basically picking up where IPMS and BYU cannot, because the data is within Census and can't be publicly released yet. And so she's and her team are digitizing the censuses from 1950 to 1990. So in some regards, you might not want to go to an FSRDC because IPMS are the people who have the better census data in some regards.
You might think about, right?
Maybe I'm
data
allowed.
providers, the gap between like what a data provider can do, right? You're forward thinking. There's always one more thing to do, and we don't have to collect data. We don't have to do that next piece. Like we get to fill in the gap. But yes, and you don't have to be in the FSRDC to get the full count censuses for 1850 to 1950, right? There's a rule, so those data become public after 72 years. We've partnered with Ancestry.com and Family Search to digitize and transcribe them. And so there's a bit of a process to access restricted use versions outside of the FSRDC, right? You can do these through a university license, but you could get names and addresses, and anonymized versions of those full count census data are available publicly. So which I think they're just this amazing resource because you can think about every small population that you wanted to study and there's never enough sample. Here's everybody in the US is a nice response to that.
We're going to move on again to another previously asked question. This is a question for Words. Are there any new non-financial and accounting databases that are coming to Words in the near future?
I guess that's me again. So we recently launched Words environmental data, which is largely EPA data with some other data requested by users and researchers in this space mixed in. Largely we presented it on Words so that it can be easily integrated with what we already have. People are free to access it outside of us if they'd like. We just want to act as a resource for the academic community in that regards. We also have some additional healthcare data called SDS, which is, I looked up the acronym in response. I think it's like Standard Structured Data Solutions, yes. This is kind of a structured, it's a structured data solution is, how do I describe this? So there's a regulation change in about 2019, I believe, where pretty much every doctor in the United States has to post their prices for their medical information, the price for anything really, everything from, poking you with a needle to open a heart surgery, and not just one price, but the price based off of every single insurance they accept, as well as out-of-network prices. This is kind of completely unstructured but machine readable. So SDS goes in, they kind of harmonize and standardize this data, and they supply it. They're one of a few data providers who do so, and they're on Words as well. There's a few other data vendors that we're working with, I guess me specifically, typically, but nothing's really finalized yet, so I wouldn't talk about it much, but we're trying to push in this area. We know that the general ecosystem of data and how it all talks to each other is ever expanding, and that's ever more useful. So
another question came in as well during that time, and that comment is for Dewey, which is, will be great to see data on electric vehicles, commercial real estate data in Dewey. Atlas EV Hub has some good data, but it's not complete. So, and we just got a couple of other questions that came in. So for IPUMS, does IPUMS have plans to bring in economic program data, like the economic census or census of government?
We talk about this all the time, or may not these specific things, but sort of data expansion. We are exclusively or almost entirely grant funded from NIH and NSF, and so we've really spent a lot of time. We want to think about these data sources that are high value with high startup costs. That's one key consideration. We need to know that there's sufficient usage, right? And that, again, is a chicken and egg problem, because if they're too hard to use, then who's using them? How do you get the current users to come over? But I think the other thing that we spent a lot of time thinking about is we need a champion for the data here. So we try hard to have a core series of data products that we can maintain, where we have expertise and gusto in keeping them up, instead of spinning up a tiny little harmonization project that sort of works and then we run out of funding for, and then we don't have the latest rounds of data. And so all that to say, we're always open to it, but I think we need to make the math work and have the enthusiasm on our end too. I had a question for Evan. I'm curious, you talked about, right, you're essentially maintaining a bibliography of folks who are using, right, your version, or I think who are accessing data through you of data sets that are otherwise available. We also maintain a bibliography, so I will say some of this is self-serving, but like, I'm curious about how you're finding those, how much you have like engagement from from clients, or how that works?
Yeah, that's a super great question. And I'll probably ask the question back to you because I'm sure you guys have implemented things that we haven't thought of yet. You know, Google Scholar gets you so far, right? So obviously we have a bunch of different data vendors with alerts and things like that. You know, we ask but don't require citations to mention Dewey. What we actually care about is that our partner is being mentioned, right? So they're partnering with Dewey because they want to get the citation. And so a lot of times we have to go find citations that are citing People Data Labs or Veriset or SafeGraph. And so obviously we're kind of scouring the world for those. One thing we're building into our like consumer and product workflow right now is a bit of like a kind of self-reported status of papers because we're introducing this group of teams and where you can work together with different users and invite users to share data sets and things like that. And so it makes sense to tie like a paper or a project team to that same entity. And then you can actually track progress of that. And then potentially it's actually going to be self-reported through our product. So we have even better coverage of that. But I'm sure we're missing some right now. It's definitely hard to see, especially with all the gates we see on all these different publications and whatnot. So I'd be curious how you guys are doing that, and if there's anything I'm missing there, because it's definitely top of mind for us to get better at.
Hey, it's competing with Google is hard, like hard to
Yeah.
stop. I think, right, Google Scholar is particularly challenging, and I think the thing we're often trying to figure out is how are we, like, what's the dud rate, what's the duplicate rate that we're seeing there, but also what are we missing and how are we getting the search terms? We do require a citation of our version of the data, but that doesn't mean that people are actually doing it. We host an
That's
annual,
right.
we host a research awards competition where people will submit and they're certain that they've used our data, but we're not referenced anywhere in the paper at all. So any of you who are working with researchers who want to submit, tell them to cite the data, because I will reject I will desk reject the paper if it's not cited. I think the other thing we've like embargoing dissertations is something, so we're trying to capture recent things, but it's that piece of trying to capture stuff that we've missed in recent years and making sure we're going back to things. And so we're tracking them centrally, and then we have a user-facing tool again, because we're trying really hard to help people see how could we use these data.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of related, but it's related to the topic too. This is actually one of the ways we're looking at AI to enable this, to do it at scale. So in the past, we literally hired a human contractor to go through, pull everything, pull out the duds, report back. We would then scan them again, etc. There's a lot of cool stuff with AI, and actually not even on necessarily citations of our partners, but seeing thematic changes to what's being published, and then tailoring, our data acquisition plan based on, popular types of data that's out there and being published with more commonly, or finding like the data vendors that are, seeing increases in citations that aren't on our platform and using that as a way to be like, oh, maybe they, should work with Dewey instead to make it easier for them to reach more researchers. And so that's something that we're building on. It's been pretty cool to do, but yeah, a long way to go.
Another comment that came in, the distributor is critical among the versions for replication and should be part of a standard citation. Looks like that's most of the questions. I'll leave one last question, unless anybody else has any other questions. But something for all three of our panelists today. So with the removal, you've probably all seen some of the federal data sets being removed recently, and all of that going away. Do you anticipate any challenges for how your platform collects or hosts data? And what efforts might you be taking to preserve some of the data on your platforms?
I can start, right? I mean, we're paying attention to federal data availability. The other hat I wear is working with their team that works with US federal person level data. And so I think we've worked really hard to ensure that we have all the source materials that we need to maintain those. At some point, if data stop coming out, if the data faucet turns off, that's quite a big problem. But to the extent we have the things that we need, they aren't subject to that. And so I think this is also where we've been having some pretty intentional conversations about what is adjacent to the work that we're doing, and really recognizing. I will take this moment to plug the Data Rescue Project, and I will grab the other one that's that's at Boston's Department of the School of Public Health. They are doing they have a tool for finding where data are. But I think the space that we've really landed in is it's inefficient for us to go look at, right, we work with large scale secondary population data. That's the space that it makes sense for us to do this, because we're poorly positioned to assess the relative value and the relative risk of loss for other data collections outside of that space. And so we're trying to collaborate with others who are in our sphere and figure out who has what needs to be backed up. And I think we've just moved towards really thinking about what reproducibility with what we have now and ensuring that we're capturing all of that looks like, and we're feeling glad that we anticipate being able to continue to offer these things even if they aren't available elsewhere, but that's contingent on them continuing to be released. At this point, we don't see or hear any indication that for the data collections that we offer, that's not happening. But we're watching closely.
I mean, I can answer for words in a deeply unsatisfactory way, which is that I think this is really common for us. Private data vendors often make secular changes. They often just stop providing data completely, and then maybe a few months later provide it again in a different format. It's kind of, for us, it's a little bit, in some regard, what the job is. And I think we're doing our job very well if no one notices that there are any marked changes. But as I answer a lot of support questions, I get a lot of these detailed questions. I mean, that's something my team talks about every single week, about massive changes to the data that keep happening or keep not happening. So in some sense, we're maybe a little helpless. A lot of secondary, financial data, the primary sourcing for it is published by the U.S. government. It's not, some sort of unofficial industry survey. It's, regulatory filings or that plays into it in some regard. So let's say the entire U.S. government sort of data spigot turned off tomorrow, I don't think there's much we could do about it. On the other hand, in terms of changes, an off-on kind of state, data formatting change, that's I don't know, that's what the job is, I guess.
Yeah, I think on the Dewey side, we don't have sources that are just directly from anything in the government. So I'm not worried about an instant shut off of data access. There's a chance that upstream, one of our data partners is using those as sources, and it could affect their data products. One thing that we wanted to make sure is included in our license, because this is another concern we hear a lot with the subscription model, is what happens if you turn off a vendor or you lose a vendor or something changes with the data source. The way we wrote our end user terms is that as long as you've consumed the data ahead of time, if something happens critically to one of these partners and they have to turn off for some reason like this, as long as you consume the data before that partner has been removed from the platform, you actually still retain permitted use to continue the use of that data with your for your paper. So yes, you might not be able to get continued updates to that data set, but we want to enable researchers to continue their research and not totally get barred if they're years into a paper, and all of a sudden they lose access to a certain data set. So that would probably be our most related answer. I'll comment quickly on one other comment that was kind of more of a comment / question around just real estate data and EV charging. I'll do it really quick. We do have a pretty good suite of real estate data sets. I know the question was specifically around commercial. We have one vendor in commercial today, but generally what we're thinking about is, we know one of the frustrations was kind of a disappearing ZTrax or a lack of some great real estate data sets. And so we kind of quickly built a complementary suite of real estate data providers and added them to the platform, but it's definitely a place where we're looking to double down in. And so I appreciate that feedback, and we'll continue to go there. And then on the EV side, we do have a good point of interest data set for where EV charging stations are located, but I think the question was more around kind of electric vehicles themselves. And I think transportation is a kind of very related type of data category compared to the POI and real estate data sets we have. So I appreciate the feedback, and something we'll definitely build towards.
All right.
Well, it looks like there's no more questions. So Amy, I will hand it back to you to take us home.
Okay, I'll leave it open, just one last chance to our committee members and other panelists, if anyone has questions. I know there's a 10-second rule. But if not, and you can unmute yourself and interrupt me. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I would like to especially thank our speakers for taking the time to be with us. Everyone who registered for the webinar today will be sent a link to the recording. May not be till next week, or so be patient. And I just want to say have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye. Thank you for having us. Enjoy.